from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. It's Mind the Gap, a practical web series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, Associate Director of Bands at University of Central Arkansas, Brantley Douglas, music specialist, retired from Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia, Keith Taylor, Fine and Performing Arts Coordinator at Atlanta Public Schools, Dr. Sara Womack. Tonight's conversation moderated by Susan Smith. Please welcome Susan Smith.
Good evening, and welcome to the 19th episode of Mind the Gap, a webinar series focused on young and new teachers and those student teachers whose experience have been and continue to be interrupted by the pandemic. My name is Susan Smith, and I'm an educational consultant for Music for All and a lecturer in music education at Troy University in Troy, Alabama. I've taught at all levels and areas of music education, and I'm especially interested in supporting young teachers as my daughters are starting their second and fourth years as music educators. My colleague and friend David Starnes, Director of Orchestras at Kennesaw Mountain High School in Cobb County, Georgia, and I have been hosting these since last May and have learned so much from our panelists and look forward to tonight's discussion on recruiting and marketing yourself moving forward in terms of applying for jobs during and after the pandemic. I'm really excited to have all of our panelists with us tonight. We are, poor Sara, I told her she was outnumbered. We've got a lot of JMU Dukes here with us this evening, but I have a wonderful connection with all of them in different ways. Brantley Douglas is going to tell us a little bit about himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brantley Douglas, and I'm currently the Associate Director of Bands at the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from New Jersey, been involved with band, orchestra, drum corps throughout my career. Did my teaching in Wisconsin, taught middle school and high school there, then went on to grad school and ended up teaching at JMU, where I had the pleasure of meeting Susan Smith, and very glad to be here.
Awesome, welcome. Yeah, I'm a lot older than you, so you weren't my teacher. But when my husband taught there, we knew each other, and it was wonderful to get to know you. I do know Keith Taylor in a special way, and I'll tell you about that after he introduces himself. What a lead-in.
Yeah, that's nice. Actually, I was going to make that part of my little thing, so if that's okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
So anyhow, I'm pretty much a Fairfax County person because I was born, raised, and I did all my service to music education at the beginning, in the main part of my teaching career in Fairfax County. But truth be told, Susan's mother was my band director in elementary school at Navy Elementary School, and despite that, she let me continue on. Yes. So anyhow, I taught 2 years at I started teaching in 1985 for Fairfax County Public Schools. I taught for 2 years at the middle school and elementary level, and then I taught for 20 plus years at Chantilly High School on the high school level. And then in 2009, I became the music specialist, which is kind of like the music supervisor, but that's not the title, of Fairfax County's music program until 2016, where at which time I retired. And now I'm the part-time teacher at Freedom High School in Loudoun County, where we live in South Riding, Virginia. And I also teach a couple of classes and concert band at Shenandoah Conservatory.
Just can't get away from it, huh?
No, I have failed at retiring. That's what I've been told several times.
Well, we had the pleasure of having Sara in Alabama with us for a long time, and truth be known, she was the past president of the Alabama Music Educators when I was president-elect, and was our Southern Division president when I was president of Alabama. So welcome, Sara. Tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, so I am from Birmingham originally. Ended up teaching elementary music for about 15 years there before I got this position. I'm currently the arts coordinator for Atlanta Public Schools, where I supervise about 200 dance, theater, music, and visual art teachers in about 70-something schools. And so this is my fourth year in that position. I'm super excited to be here. It is hiring season, so it's like the topic of conversation during my work day and now tonight. So looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. One of the things my daughter said to me as she was finishing college and interviewing for jobs is she wished someone had told her that she was working on her brand from the very beginning, and that's really what it is that we're doing. Each of you have had the opportunity to interview people and to supervise student teachers, but you yourself were in that role of that new teacher. And I'd like to know what are maybe two things that you wish someone had told you as you were getting started. Sarah, do you want to start us off?
Sure. My first thing is, I wish they had told me, but I definitely have learned along the way, is it's all about relationships. So I've never gotten a position without somebody helping me along the way, putting in a good word for me, writing a recommendation, having some kind of connection. So the music world is pretty small. I mean, even across the country. So somebody always knows somebody that you know. So just make sure that you spread your net wide, let people know that you're looking, see if they can put in a good word for you, or at least can give you a heads up about positions that are coming open. And then just do your best work so that your reputation kind of carries you forward. So definitely it's all about the relationships. The second thing is just to remember that you're going to land where you're supposed to be. I definitely have applied for way more positions than I would probably like to admit. And didn't get most of them. And ones that I thought were perfect for me, like, oh my gosh, I check every box that they asked for and ended up not getting the position and, overanalyze the interview to the nth degree. What did I do wrong? Talk to people about it. But now looking back, I didn't get that position so that I could get another position. And then even if it wasn't necessarily a position that I thought would be great for me at that point, it ended up teaching me something and, has helped me in my career. So just know you're going to land where you're supposed to be. If you don't get something that you think is perfect, it just means that you're not supposed to be there at that point. So
that's awesome advice, to look at things from the positive for sure. Keith, what do you have for us?
First, I have to remember to unmute. Okay, so there we go. That's the old guy's statement. So anyhow, sorry about that, guys. First of all, those were great. I wish that I'd heard those two things too. You're going to land where you're supposed to be. And to piggyback on the first thing that Sara had said, there's a phrase that I've kind of it just bounces around in my head all the time. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. And who's going to remember you, which is kind of all part of this interview process, and for us to get our image on the mind of the person who's doing the hiring. But it's who knows you that really, I didn't realize there were these people that were watching out for me and wanting me to go these places and all. And I was like, I just go in and I do my job. And that was probably good for me, because when I have too much control, it's not a good thing. So that it was really a great perspective for me to gain. So just to piggyback on that, the other couple of things is that it's a lifestyle, it's not a livelihood. So when you're first coming out of college and you're trying to get yourself established and all these things you want, it's kind of like parenthood, when you want your kid to walk and then they walk and you're like, oh, why do they walk? And then they talk and the same thing. It's like, so when you get out of college and you get your car payment and your mortgage payment or rent or whatever the case is, it's like all this regular life stuff happens. And what's good to remember is that it's a lifestyle of the profession. So many times I get into these places where they're like, we're not going to talk about shop. But if you get a group of band directors sitting around, you're going to talk shop. You can't help it. And you want to. There's a side of you that says you don't want to, but it's like, it's okay to like that and enjoy that. And that fighting that natural trend or tendency was something that I was trying to do. And then I just finally gave up and I was like, no, you know what? I really do like talking about this. And then I guess the first thing out of the blocks was just this one last small thing. Don't try to do things that are too hard when you're first starting out. Just know your limits or try to know your limits and ask advice and have a very good network of people that you can call or talk to on various topics.
Fantastic. I'm glad you had something else because my internet froze there for a second and I was like, what is happening?
See, it's all for a purpose.
It's a thing. For those of you who've been on with us before, I've moved closer to the router to try to, and got a new router, and we're in the middle of, many of us in the South, dealing with storms. So if whoever, last man standing, I guess, Keith, you'll kind of keep things going if we all kind of get going out of here. But Brantley, what do you have to share with us?
Well, piggybacking on both what Sara and Keith have said, I think it's important to know the community that you're going into as well, especially if you're not from that area. As I mentioned, I grew up in New Jersey and went out to Wisconsin, and my first job was in a suburb of Milwaukee. And I really didn't know anything about where I was going. And I was just excited to have a job interview. And it didn't matter, so I didn't have the chance to research the town that I was going to. But knowing something about the community, something as simple as knowing what the school colors might be, and when you're going to interview, making sure you're not wearing the opposing school's colors. Those may seem like very silly things, but those are things that can make a strong first impression, whether it's positive or negative. But just knowing, again, a little bit about the area. Is it an urban area? Is it a rural area? Just sort of knowing the makeup of the town where you're going to teach, I think is something that can be definitely to your advantage.
The color thing is big because when we first moved here, I didn't know a lot about the sports thing, and we were once, in Robert was director of bands, we were invited to an LSU football game, and I wore a red jacket, and as friends of the band, and I would never make a mistake like that again. But you you learn quickly for sure. So we're going to dive right in and talk about some specifics. And I said this in the chat, but if you have questions, please feel free to add them there or in the Q&A for our participants. We'd love to use those as to kind of guide the conversation or follow them up at the end, whatever it is. So don't hesitate. But this idea of a portfolio. We have some principals or supervisors who don't want it, some who do. What does it include? When do you present it? When do you give it to them? And as we do this portion, we just feel free to kind of jump in, or if you have something to say about that particular area, if there's something that you think you'd like to say. Sara, what do you think about something that makes it an effective or memorable and engaging portfolio?
Yeah, I definitely think digital is the way to go, especially at this point. Still, most of our interviews are on Zoom. And so, yeah, definitely digital is the way to go. And I think share it far and wide. So when you are writing your cover letter, put a link to your digital portfolio. On your resume, put a link. If you are putting a link on your resume or in your cover letter, just make sure you use like a short URL or even a QR code. So if the principal prints out the resume, at least they're not having to type in the big long address. They can just put something in really quick or use their phone for the QR code. But I think link to videos, that is so powerful. So little snippets of you teaching, not showing kids' faces, but just from the back of the room. Any kind of concerts that you directed, any kind of recitals that you've performed in, or even concerts that you've performed in, I think are definitely powerful tools. And bring it up in your interview. So many times, they're like, oh, here's my portfolio, and that's it. Bring things up in your interview, especially if you're on Zoom. You can show videos when they ask a question like, tell me about a great lesson. Oh, yeah, here's a little bit about it. Let me show you like a 30-second clip of, the final performance or something. So it's definitely powerful. Use it in your interview. Don't just forget about it, because principals aren't going to look at it.
Yeah, and that shows another layer of technology skills as well, that you're able to do that. So when should we present that? I guess Sara has kind of hit on that a little bit, but I have seen some principals say, hand them a big notebook and they just kind of chuck it off. I don't want to see that. Keith, has it been your experience that principals want something in paper, or when should they present those or not?
Yeah, I'd say before, during, and after. Like, have it available always. I think the link is what makes it a very flexible thing. So for a principal could be at home and having like, this is the time that they have to do what they need to do. And you want to be there, as far as a marketing. But if I was marketing, I'd have it in paper link, and I'd put it on a thumb drive. The first time Steve Bryan, as a composer, he was like, I was like, do you have a card? And he gave me a thumb drive, and he just handed out thumb drives like to everybody as samples of him and his contact information. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And that was really handy to have. So it was just novel, but at the same time, it was pretty effective. And I thought, wow, this is what people could use instead of business cards. A lot of colleges, I'm not sure that all of them are, but I know that we are at Shenandoah, that you have to develop an e-portfolio of yourself. So you develop your own web page, and that is incredibly important. It should incorporate, and I think, Sara, you summed it all up in terms of content, but you should have some definitely you interacting with students and showing your interaction, like your ability to engage students. And don't forget that can include, and probably should at this point, your ability to do so online. So, your Brady Bunch of kids, and then you doing your thing online. Because my student teachers this year are fantastic at this. I mean, they blow the regular teachers from out of the water on a regular basis. I'm like, wow, they're really fantastic. But showing yourself a clip of that, always keep in mind the permissions. So you need to make sure that you're observing what permissions are necessary. But then I also thought that one of the things that I saw in a lot of portfolios were the musicians making music themselves, like them playing their instrument. That's a really nice thing to know and be comfortable with. So I think that's also a great thing to have. But I would say have it available at any point. The place you push it on them is like during the interview. Have it as a link in your resume, cover letter. It should just be a part of your header.
Yeah, even a link to a senior recital is a great way to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, anything you making music. Yeah.
Yeah, Brantley, as a drill writer, I'm sure you would have loved to have had these digital portfolios for people to see your work and videos of things as you were applying for jobs. Anything else on that format that you'd like to kind of add?
Yeah, I think Keith and I are about the same era. And one of the things that I appreciate, having my peripheral knowledge of technology, making sure that if it's a digital portfolio or an e-portfolio, that it's something that's easily navigable, so that if you go from one place, that you can easily get back to the main page, so that you're not trying to find the link and you keep going off and get deeper and deeper and can't get back. So make sure that there are those hyperlinks, on each page to get you back to the home page, so then you can go to the next area. I think that's something that's very important. Also, here in Arkansas, still a rural state where principals are asking, well, I want a hard copy. All right. Right. So when you have your hard copy, make sure it's organized. Make sure you have a table of contents. Right. So, and because that table of contents is sort of like that hyperlink for you, so that you can instantly go back to that and say, I need to go to the next section to go and look at whatever it is that's in there. So that's what I have to add to.
Yeah, cool. I can see the wheels moving with my students who are on here going, oh Lord, she's gonna make us have a website next year. Methods and materials, it's coming. Get ready. No, I think it's important to kind of stay up to date. And while we're talking about a resume, the thinking has changed on this, and people have different ideas. This idea of should it be just one page, or maybe front and back, or should it be really, in some areas really engaging visually, or should it be something that's a little more conservative? Especially for a teacher. And we'll just kind of go around the room again. Sara, on the resume?
I like colorful and visually appealing. That's what's going to make it rise to the top and make it stand out from the Times New Roman 12-point font. So yeah, definitely visually appealing. Even some color blocks, more like an infographic, but with plenty of information, I think is wonderful. Definitely keep it to one page, front and back. make sure you list your references on the resume. Don't say, if requested, just go ahead and list them with their contact information. Make sure that it's clear what job you're looking for. So especially if you're just applying to a district, like, are you looking for elementary? Are you looking for high school band? Just be clear about what it is that you're looking for. And again, put that digital portfolio link on there so that it's always accessible, just like Keith was saying. Just constantly push that. And one thing kind of on that same note is, you were mentioning like you're marketing yourself, and I see it as like you're curating your digital presence, right? So you have a digital portfolio, but you also need to think about social media. So you need to double check your social media, make sure that it's professional and appropriate. Don't delete anything. If there's no social media, that's a red flag too. So make sure that you have something up, but that it's kind of, curated and, certain pictures are able to be seen. But yeah, the resume, I think colorful, visually appealing, make sure you add those references on there. Have your experience listed from most recent to oldest. Like I see it opposite, and then it gets confusing. So make sure most recent to oldest, but that's the first place I go to look for information. So
yeah. So Keith, when you see references or you see things, what's kind of a red flag when you see certain types of references or you don't see other types of references? Does that speak to you as somebody who's looking at a resume?
In a way it does. If like Sara said, if they say references are available upon request, it's like, that person doesn't want no. So I'm like, that is actually a red flag. And I've heard some. My wife is an assistant principal, so she does this hiring. So she said that she's heard it said in places that don't list your references by some colleges or whatever. That's not true. Just you need to list references. I kind of look for. But when you're a student who's coming out of college, you may have employment that could help, because but having a reference as a principal, that's the most important thing. A principal has been someone who's seen you come to work and can say that this person shows up, they're on time, they're diligent. And that's the most important thing I think that principals actually care about, is that will they show up? Will they be on time? Will they turn their grades in? And do attendance. So that's a very important thing. The supervisor thing isn't, because to me, it's more who is your band director, your high school band director, your college band director. That's what I would be looking for in as far as who to have be on there. I would also say that in the resume, I agree, one page, front and back. Don't go to multiple pages. It doesn't make you look better. And you want to make sure that you're listing important, salient employment, not babysitting. So, you want to just make sure that it's relevant employment and experience, and look for the experience where you're engaged with students.
Awesome. Brantley, I try to encourage my students to think about that. It's probably not a musician who's looking at this for the first time, and so I say if you say a brass tech, they think that you're probably working on instruments or something, or they have no idea if they're a coach or something, might not have any idea of what to say. Can you speak a little bit to maybe the verbiage and also who the audience might be?
Well, yeah, thinking about that again, sort of doing your research, knowing who you're going to who's going to see your resume. If it's the principal, trying to find out his background. I'm still surprised at the number of principals that are coaches and how they like to take things out of sports reference. So being able to use those analogies are things that could probably help you, because it allows them something that they can relate to. We have that. Well, I probably shouldn't say this since this is being recorded, but there are other places where they have that issue where you kind of have to turn your musical terms into sports terms or sports analogies so that there's a better understanding. And then you can sort of see the light bulb go off and go, oh, okay. So being able to make that connection. I wanted to say one other thing about the resumes. Make sure that you read the job description and that you adapt your resume to meet that job description. And in particular, put things in order the way that they're listed in the job description as well. Because one of the things that will happen is I think I read somewhere where they'll only spend like 7 to 10 seconds looking at your resume, right? And if it's not in the order of things that they had specified in the job placement, they're going to look and go, oh, well, this person, and, and sort of toss it aside. So make sure that you are reading the job description carefully, right? Have those bullet points so that those can be highlighted in the order that they're presented in the job description.
If I could just have a go back on it, what Brantley stirred up some great thoughts here, because the resume actually will have to go to HR and to the principal and to the district central office to some degree. So it may need to be nudged, but it also, the verbiage is actually really, really important, because just as an example, you would not believe how many people thought clinicians were doctors. Like if you specified that you were a clinician, I am not kidding. Administratively, that was what was thought. So listing under everything that you did, but a description of your responsibilities and what you did is really, really important too.
Can I say a few other things?
Of course.
So your resume is your first, introduction of you to the administrator. So make sure you proofread it. I've come across so many spelling errors. Get people to proof it for you. Check your margins, like how things are centered, that the dates are all consistent. It's not, spring and then you switch to 2020. It's just consistent. Get people to read it. That's a huge thing. If you can't submit a resume that's, doesn't have spelling errors, then a principal's not even going to take a look at, you for an interview. Also, when you submit it as a PDF, not as a Word document. The PDF just seems finished. A Word document just seems like you just typed it up really quick. And when we open it, sometimes the formatting is different. So PDF is the way to go.
Yeah, everybody can open a PDF. I remember one of my high school students asking me, I'm sorry, Brantley, but asking me if spelling counted. And I said, for the rest of your life, it will, it will for the rest of your life count. Brantley, what did you have for us?
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen saxophone, S-A-X-A, that's, just drives me up a wall. But one of the things that I wanted to say also, when I talk about tailoring your resume for the job description, right? Be careful with with replace, okay? Because if you have something spelled incorrectly, it won't catch that. So to make sure that as you do the replace and find, especially if you're doing a he versus a she, to make sure that all of those things are done. So even after you do the find and replace, read through it. And one of the things that I do, I do this, is that I'll have my Mac read it back to me, just in the voice, and oh, there was something that I missed. So that's another trick that you can do as well.
That's a great thing. Yeah, Keith.
Yeah, there was one other thing that I meant to mention, and it was make sure that the contact information that you have is able to be obviously current, but can also last a long time, because your college email address may end. So you may want to make sure that you have a different kind of, like a Gmail address that you're always reachable at, and then make sure that your cell phone number doesn't change, because that's just something that I've run into. And the same thing with your references. And
that email address is professional, and that it's not something that your fraternity or sorority sister gave you or something like that. We'll take a couple of questions here. We have one from a veteran teacher asking about should they consider a CV. I recently tried to put some things of my own together and wished I had kept track of all those honor bands and trying to recreate that. Those of you who have done college and those types of experiences, you've put together a CV. Is that something you would, if someone's interviewing for a job, even as a in-service teacher, should they create more of a CV approach?
Can I address that? Being not that Keith isn't, but one of the things that looking at the CV, and I was going to talk about this. I think Sara mentioned the reverse chronological type of resume. When you're starting out, you won't necessarily have all that experience. So if you're starting out, I say something more like a functional resume is something that's good where you can highlight your skills. But now if you're a veteran teacher, and I think it's good to list those things. And again, it depends upon the type of job that you're looking at as well. I would think that if you're a veteran teacher, an experienced teacher, and you're going for that director of bands position in, Sarrusophone City with 12 schools, that they're going to want to see what you have done, what you've accomplished, how you've done at contests, because those are things that are going to be very important. So again, I think it depends upon the level of job and your experience, the type of resume that you're going to use, or if you're going to go with the curriculum vitae.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else on that, on the CV? We're good? Kyle Howard, sorry, I said your name, but wants us to kind of talk of things about what's in a portfolio. And obviously we've said already maybe some, a resume, cover letter, letter of interest, if it's something that if the job hasn't come out yet, or you just want to get the information to a principal, but copies of drill that you've written maybe, or arrangements that you've done. Sara, you mentioned lesson plans, or experiences, everyone's videotaping now with EdTPA, them teaching, or examples of those types of lessons. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add, Sara?
I think what we were talking about with you actually performing, so your senior recital, or even if you're just doing a concert in a larger group, I think that's still relevant, so that the the principal knows what experience you've had just performing.
Yeah, and even conducting on spring concert or something, even if your internship is finished and you have the opportunity to go back and conduct. I certainly did that at Oakton, and I was glad I did that when I student taught, that I had a chance to go back and do that. But maybe an idea of what your grading scale might be, or experiences that you might have for your students, or things like that. Anything else for the portfolio anybody can think of?
Did you say your philosophy in
I
there
didn't,
too?
but
No.
that's right up there. Yeah.
Philosophy is an important thing to put in there, and not to sound too headsy about it, but it's important that, because you want it to boil it down to what you believe music education is, what your role as a music educator is, and why you want to teach. I think that's kind of important. That'll come up later, I'm sure, but it's germane to your e-portfolio. It's germane to your portfolio. But the cover letter is also, I think, how you're excited to get into the position and all. That's important.
Yeah, and letters of reference, if you have those, include those. And if you have like a syllabus, or even a fake syllabus that you created for a methods class, include that too.
That's a very good point, the syllabus. I had
Awesome.
one guy had score sheets from festivals and things like that. We had comments that were made about the ensemble that person was responsible for, which is that's fine. Samples of you at assessments or concerts, whatever.
Yeah, recordings of the ensembles, because that can be a great way to differentiate. Brantley?
I was going to say, any licensure information that you have showing that you were certified, I think that's something that's very important as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
I was also going to say, as a new teacher, you may not think about this, and I know those ed philosophy courses can be so hard, right? And it's like very heady, and you have to read them 3 or 4 times. But realizing that your philosophy should be a living document, and that's something that you should return to, especially as you gain more experience teaching, to adjust your philosophy. And you should look at that at least every year, and make the modifications to that.
Yeah, the longer you teach, you realize that you make every decision based on what you believe. And I try to start with my students, them writing just I believe statements, because it can be hard to write a philosophy. You don't know what you think about or what you think about something until you've done it. And so the opportunity to adjust them, I think that's wise, Brantley, to kind of look at those. Well, we have a couple more questions, but we're going to kind of move on, and then we'll come back to those. So the interview is the next part, and how to seem like yourself in the interview, but still be professional, but not be too boastful. There are a lot of lines to kind of navigate for young teachers and for veterans teachers as well. So we'll just kind of go around the room, maybe about body language or some of the do's and don'ts or red flags that you see. Sara, you've probably done more interviewing here recently than everybody else. We'll start with you.
I think just being yourself. So, I mean, it's hard to be somebody else. So administrators want to see how you're going to be in front of the kids. So whatever you are as a teacher, that's what you need to be in the interview. So just be yourself. Definitely be professional and really take time to read the room. I know, like, I practiced interview questions, right? Like, I got the big long list. I wrote out my answers, practiced my answers. And so many times I was so busy reciting, the answer that I'd practiced that I didn't read the room very well. So, I maybe had gone on a little too long and the administrators weren't looking at me anymore. They were writing things or thinking about what they were going to cook for dinner. Or they were engaged, and then I kept going. So I think reading the room is important, and tell stories. Like, that's what's going to bring administrators in. So that great lesson that you taught and how the kids reacted, or the lesson that did not go well and how you fixed it. But I do think practicing the questions is good, especially those that are, common. The tell me about yourself, your a good lesson, not so good lesson, how you handle conflict, those things. And then always have questions for the interviewers. That's a red flag when you're not interested in, learning any more about the position. So, and just a tip, don't talk about money or days off or break time in those questions. That's not a principal question, an HR question. But anyway, those are just some tips. Oh, and dress professionally. Even if it's not a conservative school, still it's important for the administrators to know that you can be professional when needed.
Yeah, fantastic. Keith, what do you have to add there about the interview and the things that you saw?
Well, that covers a lot, actually. I don't know if you're going to go through the order of the questions, but I do want to say one thing. I think we touched this before. You mentioned, I think the most important word to keep in mind is to be balanced as much as possible in talking to principals. They expect the person to be nervous. That's just normal. But they want to see, like Sara was saying, they want to see how you rise above adversity like that and how you can respond when you're nervous, because of course you're going to be nervous when you start teaching for the first time in a new job, but they want to see how you're going to be in front of kids. It doesn't do any good for you to want a job so much that you can't be yourself. So you got to be yourself, but you don't want to be cocky, because that can flip on you really badly. And that happened a couple of times. Like the message that a principal is going to get, you have to be careful about this, is that I can't work with this person. Like they think I'm going to work for them. It's like, you got to know your place. Just think of it that way. But one of the things that I think Brantley also had said, I would drive into the town and I would stop at the grocery store. I'd go in, I'd buy something, just try to kind of get a feel for the town, or the communities that I drive around the communities. For all 20 years I taught at Chantilly, I drove around Brookfield and Greenbrier just to get the feel for it again, because I didn't live in the area. But it's like, it had changed, but I wanted to, what it felt like in order to be there. But you got to be relaxed as possible, knowing that you're not supposed to be totally relaxed. But if you can take that nervousness and turn it into like your excitement and energy, it's really important. The very first time that they ask you a question, it's usually going to be, tell me about yourself. or what is your philosophy of teaching? So I agree. You have to have a story of what inspired you to go into music, and it should be somewhere along the lines um, uplifting. Somehow what you're going to do to inspire students to love music for the rest of their life. That's what your goal should be. And I think if you can tell that in a really a meaningful story that's honest about yourself, that's a fantastic way to get the ice broke and you relaxed and letting them know who you are. And I want to make sure that we talk about the different formats of interviews, because a lot of band director jobs, they panel up. So the audience that you have may be multiple people, where you're going to be talking to the principal, athletic director, a booster, a high school, one of the kids in the marching, the drum major or whatever. I mean, a whole panel of people. So that's also kind of a different kind of interview. So, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, well, we don't have a lot of later, so feel free to jump on that. And then, Brantley, I'm going to ask you a little bit about some of the what not to do and things to stay away from. So, Keith, if you want to talk about the panel a little bit.
Well, in certain counties, I know that in our county, a lot of principals would follow what's considered a prescribed way to interview. It became sort of an ethical thing that you had to follow a certain format, and each person had to ask one question, and there were no go backs for things like that. And it adds a different dynamic of pressure when a question gets asked, because you can't ask them questions. And it's a different kind of interview that can be a little more high powered when you're into that thing. So you might want to get a friend or whoever to give you typical questions that you would have to formulate answers extemporaneously, so that you're ready to go with some sort of story for each item that pops up. You want to know that when you're giving that response, it's like designing a marching band show. You want to target the sports audience, but you also want to target the music audience and judges, if that's your concern. So, you have a lot of things that you have to take into consideration when you're giving that answer. So,
well, I think that's a really good point. I would say for my marching band, everybody's probably sick of hearing my quote on this, but I would always say it had to work for Bubba and Boa. And, so good. Same thing. Your interview questions has got to be able to connect to all different types of people. Brantley, what are some things that you can share about things to stay away from, or how to turn a negative into a positive in an interview?
Sure. Just so you know, my football crowd, it's Martha and Irving. That those are the people that we have to make sure we.
Oh, I see. With your striped football field,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, Martha and Irving. Those are the two. But one of the things thinking about, they may ask you a question you may not know the answer to. All right. And every interview is going to be different. And the administrator may have a specific example. Well, this happened. How are you going to handle it? And it may be something that you have never had to deal with before. All right. So it is okay to say, I would need to think about that. I'm not sure how I would handle that right now because I've not had that experience. However, I can do the research and then come, and let you know what I would do about that. So it's okay not to know all the answers, especially if that administrator has that thing in his mind that I want to talk about how he would handle, band day and getting the junior high kids up here. Well, you don't know what the background is on that. You'd have to find the research, but that administrator obviously had some issue with that. So you need to be prepared for those. And if you don't know the answer, it is okay to say, I can't answer that for you right now. But if I were to have the job, this is what I would do in order to find the answer and to come up with a solution to the question.
And sometimes those are tests to see how someone would handle that, for
right,
sure. Yeah.
Right. One of the things I would avoid politics. Try not to talk about politics in your interview. Don't do that. And I will even say I've had great relationships with folks, professional relationships, and we don't talk about politics.
That might be said. You don't talk about politics and religion in polite company, for sure. So
it's not a bad idea to have I would call it rhythmic rhetoric that you can give back, because when a hard question is asked, or one that is obviously maybe kind of tricky, it's like a good response. You should be able to come up with a good response and say something like, not every hard question has a quick answer, but I would be happy to give it a lot of thought, and I would definitely be seeking what the administration would like to have happen. I think some kind of I guess tip of the hat to the administration that I would go through you to make sure that things are done properly, and collaborate to make sure that things are done well. Any principal is going to need to hear something like that. So you should be prepared to say something that's along those lines. In my experience with principals.
I wanted to say something else too. Don't make up stuff. Do not make up stuff. That's something you should definitely avoid. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm sure we all know the person that has made up the story, and you're like, this is not true, And, so just don't do that. Stick to what you know.
It comes back to you,
Right.
Especially administrators who hear kids lie all day long. They can see that stuff pretty quickly. Well, we do have a question from a teacher in Atlanta area, and then we have another one we'll get to in just a little bit. How do you answer the question, what is your biggest strength and what is your biggest weakness? Sarah, do you want to jump on this one?
Sure.
One of your teachers.
Artists. Definitely answer what's your biggest weakness, because when I first was interviewing, my answer was I'm too hard of a worker, or I'm a perfectionist, which was really not the answer to their question. That was more like, what is my strength? So I think just being honest about what it is that you can do better. So as a person, as a teacher, what is it that you can do better? It can be something, again, like a story, like when my previous administrator mentioned that this is an area, I'm in need of improvement. Just whatever it is as a person, what is your, spouse said? They're the ones that are the closest to you, something that you can always work on. And then strengths, I think always keep it about the kids. So your strength is your connection to students. Your strength is being supportive to parents. Just keeping it about the kids, I think, is going to be the strength. That's, your number one job. So I think just keep it student focused, and, student growth would be kind of an easy answer that any administrator would love.
Can I jump in on that as well? You know that question is coming, right? So you should have a prepared answer. That's the time not to hem and haw. That question is going to come, so you should know what to say when they ask you, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses?
Absolutely, yeah. Any administrator wants to know that someone is prepared and that they're going to prepare for a question like that. Keith, I'm also going to ask you to kind of answer this question that we have from an anonymous attendee. What are things that keep experienced music educators for being competitive for positions? You've seen teachers, because you've had them for a long time, apply for positions and maybe not get them that they thought maybe they had the background for. What are some things that kind of keep them from moving on?
For this particular answer, the quick Will Rogers answer would be, this is quoting Linda Gammon, by the way, a good friend of mine. Change is inevitable, but growth is optional. So the thing that keeps teachers from moving on or forward is a growth mindset, or not having one, actually, not growing. And I would say something we haven't mentioned yet that I can think of, but the two most important things right now out there for the kids is empathy from the teacher, and the ability to read empathy virtually, read empathy live. You have to know both, and the importance of mental health for students, and how it's just a huge thing right now. We're going to work through this as educators, not just as music educators, but for us. And I think we could see this as a great opportunity to really use music education as a healing thing for students who've been, locked up trying to socialize. But that a lot of teachers, that are trying to move forward professionally, if you will, they have experience, they haven't allowed themselves to they can be stuck in their ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so showing the opportunity and the ability to grow and to be flexible is the biggest thing that holds people back. That's been my experience from what I've seen.
No, I think that's very helpful. Well, who gets the job? Who makes the cut? What are the things that make somebody spark to you that maybe would make you choose, if somebody was even, would make you make that choice above somebody else? Sara?
I think that they're engaging. If they can't keep my attention, how are they going to keep the students' attention? So that you go in with those stories, with kind of your prepared answers, but still reading the room. I think that's what's going to make somebody stand out. And sometimes, just like I was saying at the beginning, it just may not be a fit if you didn't get the position. It may just be like, you just didn't, you click with people. Sometimes you just don't click with certain principals, and you probably wouldn't want to be there anyway if you didn't click with them. So yeah, I think just being engaging, being yourself. You don't want to be in a school where you can't be yourself. So go into the interview being yourself. Know your why. Know why you went into music. Know why you want to teach at that school. Kind of building on what Brantley was saying about doing your research. What is it about that school that makes you want to work there? Yeah, and just I think the first standout is the visually appealing resume with no spelling errors. That's going to raise you to the top. And then I think being engaging in the interview and following up with a nice thank you note afterwards.
Yeah. We know that the resume is important to Sara. What else makes someone pop for you, Brantley?
Especially in the interview process, I'm thinking about the process that we've just gone through here at UCA, where we had over 80 candidates to look at, and then to narrow that down to one. Making sure that the person is genuine. I know in our interview process, we wanted to make sure that the person was genuine. We had some, well, I can't talk about that specifically, but you want to make sure that the person does come across as authentic and not fake, not overly active, but not, you've got to find that right medium, like being able to read the room. I think both Sara and Keith were talking about that, and knowing when you need to go on, knowing when you need to stop, right? When you need to go more in depth. Yeah. And one of the things I think that's also important, and it's looking at eye contact. And one of the things one of our professors here, Jennifer Hawkinson, she talks about doing these Zoom interviews, since that's the type of thing. And, they actually have sessions where they practice Zooming and where they look not at the screen, but they look at the camera and they talk to the camera as opposed to looking down here and talking down that way. So those are the things that we look, at least that I think are things that can make the difference, because looking at the camera is probably the closest way that you can make virtual eye contact with someone.
Awesome. Keith, do you have something to add?
One thing that I'm always trying to find whenever I'm interviewing, and I had to do so many interviews, but I think if I'm interviewing for a teaching position, I want to hear at some point that the person is trying to get the aha moment from a kid. That they have, that is one of the things that they really are inspired to try to get a student to have, is the moment of discovery, and that's what draws them to education. If I hear a teacher say that, I'm going to want that person in a classroom somewhere, somehow. All the other things that everyone has said is great. A magician kind of interviewer who can seamlessly take things, questions in and guide me through, that makes me feel all comfortable and cozy and everything. But the real content and core, and as both Brantley and Sara have said, the genuine part of them, that is their desires to convey the knowledge they have into other students and to inspire them to make music. that's the cut that gets going. And all the other things, that their knowledge of the program of studies, that they know the school that they're interviewing, for, they know the demographics, they know what's going on, the school colors, as you said. Those are all really important things. They can be overlooked to a certain degree because those can be taught quickly, but the other inspirational things are those are important to me.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Yes,
And
please.
it's the I versus we. If I hear someone always talking I, as opposed to we, that's something that also makes a difference as well. Because to me, they're talking more about the program and the students more than about themselves.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Well, as we kind of move towards the end here, we talk about where things are going now. We all across the country, we're in different phases of this in-person versus virtual. And I don't know that any of us think that virtual is probably going to go away full time. There'll probably be some components of it moving forward. So just kind of thinking about where we see things moving forward and that transition, something to talk about. I did just remember, we forget things when we get a little bit older, but as a young teacher, you think, or just coming into the profession, you think, oh, they only want experienced people. They don't want young new people. What are some ways? Well, I'll get to the hot topics in a second. But what are some ways that like a young teacher can make themselves appealing specifically to someone as they're interviewing? Sara?
Yeah, I think anything that you can do, even if you didn't have a job, but you volunteered to teach a band camp, or, you volunteered your time to play in a show choir band, or anything like that can be added, as part of your experience that you can draw upon. So I don't know any any director that would turn away free, sectional help. So that's definitely something that you can do. Any connection that you can have to teaching could definitely beef up your experience.
Yeah. Keith, in the interview, what's some things that maybe we could say? And Brantley, we'll get to you after that.
Well, I think of an interviewer said, is there an opportunity for me to meet the students and to work with them, even if it's virtually, to offer that as an opportunity. That, in fact, a lot of interviews before the pandemic, that was a part of the interview. You had to rehearse the students and see how you engaged and interacted with them. So, I mean, anything like that during the interview, it's a little bit more you coming across and your personality coming across with them. So if you looked at when I say them, I mean the panel or the principal, you being able to communicate to them as if you're engaging a student and being compelling that way. That's the best thing. Or offering links of what you've done and achieved in terms of artifacts of teaching.
Yeah, Brantley?
Susan, I thought it was interesting that you said how a young teacher may go into a job interview and thinking, oh, well, they want someone experienced. One thing to remember is that administrators are looking at budgets as well. And I cannot tell you the number of times where I've heard that, well, we need to hire somebody out of the first year because they're going to be a cheaper hire than someone who's been teaching for 10, 12 years. So you don't know what's going on. And the analogy that I like to use in that situation, when you're in an interview, it's like going into a bakery. You're going to buy a loaf of bread, right? You're not the baker, right? Because the baker knows everything that goes into making that loaf of bread, the supplies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You just want the loaf of bread, right? That's what you want, right? So, don't if you're fortunate enough to get an interview, you go in there with the attitude that I'm going to get this job. That this is why I'm here. I'm one of the lucky ones that have gotten to this position, and realizing that there are people that are not there. And that, even if this is your first year or your 21st year, right, you're there for a reason.
Absolutely. A lot of principals are looking for that energy for that young teacher to kind of revitalize things. Well, one quick time around the table. If you have things as you look into the future, as you prognosticate, you think people will need to deal with in interviewing or preparing for jobs, what might that be? Sara?
I definitely think use of technology. Like before, that question might be in a job interview, but now it's definitely going to be in there. So like you said, I don't think technology is going anywhere anytime soon. It's definitely going to be a new facet of what we're going to have to, incorporate in teaching moving forward. It's never going to be the same. So definitely some stories about how technology didn't actually help your teaching instead of, distancing students away from what you're trying to teach. Awesome.
Keith?
Well, we're all musicians, so well, at least we hope we are. But we all have experience. This is funny too, because I found this at the beginning of the school year to be a factor in the problem with administrations heaping tons of expectations on teachers without giving them an opportunity to do the one thing we have to do, and that's practice. We have to practice. So I would say in an interview, practice the interview. You need to practice the interview. It's going to feel fake, but you've got to go through that. I can guarantee you a practice interview with a friend or a parent or a sister, brother, whoever, somebody who's going to help you go through it and go as a reflecting board and help you guide your responses a bit and be honest with you. That will help you a ton to be more relaxed. And it might also clarify your responses as well. But I would say that's a really important thing to make sure that you do.
Awesome. Brantley?
I think one of the biggest changes is going to be that you can go almost anywhere now. It doesn't have to be within your state, and that it could be an interesting adventure. And realizing that interviews, you won't just be interviewing in your local area. It could be across the country. It could be anywhere. And I think that opens up some exciting opportunities for young educators as well.
Awesome. Well, we could do this a lot longer, but unfortunately we've come to our end of our time. Don't mute yourself. Sorry. Oh, goodness. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music for all. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in his or her scholastic environment. I want to thank my guests, Brantley Douglas, Keith Taylor, and Sara Womack, for being with us this evening. I'd like to thank our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Be sure to check out Yamaha Educator Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com. Before we say goodnight, it's important you understand that now more than ever, these uncertain times continue to impact Music for All, and we're extremely grateful for any donations gifted to our nonprofit. If you enjoyed tonight's program, and in order for us to continue to provide our free educational resources and advocacy materials, please consider gifting to Music for All in any amount. The cool thing is you'll be able to watch this on our website afterwards, and also wherever you listen to podcasts as well. And finally, please join us for our next episode of Mind the Gap in 2 weeks, Tuesday, May 18th at 7:30 Eastern, Tyler, 6:30 Central, where my colleague David Starnes and I will lead a discussion titled Breaking the Code, Resources for Relief, where we will dive into the ESSER funding and help you learn more about what resources are available for your program. Until then, for Music for All, I'm Susan Smith. Thanks for being here. Good night.